Amy Heim, and I'm a PhD candidate here at St. Mary's. I'm in Jeremy Lundholm's lab. He's a plant ecologist. We do a lot of work on green roofs, which you see here, but then we also do some plant ecology in the natural environment. Today I'm going to be taking you through a tour of St. Mary's green roof. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what a green roof is and why they're constructed, as well as some of the different experiments we do here at St. Mary's. So just to give you some general information, a green roof is exactly what it sounds like. It's vegetation on top of a roof surface. And a green roof is really composed of a number of different layers. So you have vegetation on top, and the vegetation is on top of a substrate layer, which is what we call the soil, which is on top of a root barrier fabric or a water retention fabric, and all of that is placed on top of the roof itself. Now there's a number of different reasons why people are interested in building green roofs. They are really efficient at reducing stormwater runoff, and so stormwater runoff is when rainwater flows over the impervious surfaces of a city and carries with it, say, pollutants such as oils and heavy metals into local waterways. And at the same time, it can lead to sewage overflow, which is when sewage treatment plants can basically have too much water into their system, and so they're forced to release water back into local waterways. Green roofs can help reduce stormwater runoff by basically reducing the intensity of the flow, and at the same time the plants absorb water, the soil holds onto the water, all of which can help reduce stormwater runoff. Another reason why people are interested in building green roofs is because they provide a number of different thermal benefits. So in cities there's a phenomenon known as the heat island effect, which is when cities are noticeably warmer than neighboring green spaces. So if we can increase the amount of green space in a city, say on a rooftop, which is an underused space, we can help reduce the heat island effect. The other thing it does is if the cities are cooler, it takes less energy to cool those buildings in the summer. Those are really the two main reasons, but there's a number of other effects that we also get from green roofs. For example, they provide nice habitat for our local flora and fauna. So in terms of the fauna, we've done several pollinator studies on the green roof. We've noticed native bee communities, there's ant communities up here. The crows definitely like it up here. And depending on where you are, there's been a number of different studies that actually have found endangered invertebrates on green roofs. Another reason why people build green roofs is to help reduce air pollution. So plants can actually absorb pollutants in through, they're called stomata, so it's basically when the plant breathes. They can also adhere pollutants to their plant surfaces. People are interested in green roofs just because they look pretty. It's a nice effect on the building. Some of you might have seen the green roof downtown at the library, so that's a nice example of one that you can go enjoy yourself. And then really the last reason, another reason why people build green roofs is sort of for a financial gain. So some places will tax you if you have too much impervious surfaces on the building. So it's like a stormwater runoff tax. And so if you can reduce the amount of impervious surfaces, say through a green roof, you'll get a tax reduction basically. And so those are really the main reasons why people are interested in building green roofs. So there are two different types of green roofs that we really kind of consider in the industry. They're shallow, extensive green roofs, and these are green roofs that have a substrate depth between 5 centimeters and 15 centimeters. And then there are what we call intensive green roofs, which have a substrate depth 15 centimeters or higher. The majority of green roofs are planted with shallow substrate because, again, it's lightweight and it's much easier to fit on a wider array of building and structures. The other side of the coin is that because the soil is deeper on the intensive green roof, they tend to be more efficient at, say, reducing stormwater runoff and providing thermal benefits, but really only a few buildings can really support that weight, and they tend to be constructed specifically for that green roof system. Here at St. Mary's, we really work solely with the extensive green roof because the majority of green roofs are extensive, and so that's where our interest lies. And so what we've been doing is we've been looking at different plant combinations that we can use on extensive green roofs because the conditions here are extremely harsh. You'll notice on this roof right now, we've had, it's the end of July, beginning of August kind of drought we get every year, so it's very brown. The plants here have to be able to survive that dry period. We get really high temperatures up here. Again, it's very dry, but then we also have high wind. So what we do is we choose plant species that are able to survive these conditions. The majority of green roofs are planted with species of succulents. And then here in Nova Scotia, we have a local plant community called the Coastal Barren Habitat that's really good at surviving here. The Coastal Barrens are a habitat that you might be familiar with because Peggy's Cove, a popular tourist destination, is actually one of those habitat types. So the atrium green roof here at St. Mary's is one that we've been working at for several years now. You know, I can't remember how old the roof is, which is bad. I think it's like 10 years old, but basically we have different probes in this roof here, and these probes are measuring substrate temperature as well as stormwater runoff. And so the probes feed into this logger here, and then every few months we'll connect to the probe and we'll collect the data from this system. In addition to collecting the data from the roof itself, we're also collecting control data. So if you look behind you, you'll notice the white rocks here. So what we're doing is we're comparing the green roof to these white rocks. And so you can't see the probes right now, but we do have probes in this conventional roof system so that we can compare the two. The majority of green roofs made by the industry are usually planted with species of succulent, which you can see here. Succulents such as these are really drought tolerant. The industry usually uses succulents from the genus Sedum. They can survive in very shallow soil. Sometimes they just grow on the roof itself without any soil. We'll pan the camera over here and you'll see it's actually just kind of spread on its own right onto the gravel, so extremely hardy. And there's been studies that have shown they can actually survive like 2 years without any water, some species, so very, very hardy. But what we've been doing in our research is we found that although succulents are great, they're not as efficient as providing some ecoservices as other species. So taller species such as grasses, which you can see here, are more efficient at reducing stormwater runoff because these plants are taller and they need more water than the succulents. And so what we found is if we can combine different plant species together on the green roof, so increase biodiversity, we might be able to increase the ecosystem services provided by the green roof system. The two different green roof layers I talked about before are the substrate and the root barrier water retention fabric. I have two here that we use at St. Mary's. This is our substrate. You'll notice it's very different from soil you might use for gardening. It's specific for green roof systems. It's lightweight, which is extremely important because the building can only handle so much weight, and so we want to reduce the amount of weight that the green roof is adding to the building as much as possible. Part of the way we do this is adding expanded rocks like shale in here because it helps reduce sort of the water pooling as well. The other thing that we have here that we use on the green roof is our root barrier water retention layer. So this acts as a nice barrier so that the roots aren't going to damage the roof. And at the same time, it can help hold a little bit of water in here for the plants. Yeah, and those are those two different layers. We go through the different projects that we do here at St. Mary's. So we have a number of different students working with us now. The first project I'm going to share with you is one by Taylor Hicks, who is a master's student in our lab. This is her experiment right here, and what she is doing is she's testing specific plant combinations as well as soil types specific for Nova Scotia, because what we want to do is find a combination that works for our specific region. So our lab has tested all these different species. We have an idea that works here, and now we're at the point where we're like, okay, industry, we've done these tests. Here's what we found. We think this is a good one for our region. So that's what her project is about. So this is the next experiment that I'm going to talk about that we're doing here at St. Mary's. This is actually a part of my PhD project. As I was saying before, we're interested in trying out different combinations of species on the green roof because we want to increase biodiversity. But just because you have two species you want to plant together doesn't mean they'll be able to survive together in the long run. And so what I've been doing is testing different combinations to see which species are really going to be best at coexisting for the long run. And to do that, I'm looking at species that have very different traits. So I'll have you come in and we're going to take a look at how different some of these plants are. So in this module, you see these plants have very thin leaves. This is a shrub. And these plants have thicker leaves. This is a succulent. And so the thought is that these plants would be much better at growing together and coexisting for several years than, say, these plant species, which are all succulents, because these are very similar. The other idea is that these would be more efficient at sort of providing some of these benefits to the green roof because their growth forms are very different. whereas these growth forms are very similar. And so that's what this project is really about right here. Another project that we have ongoing at St. Mary's, we're really interested in how heterogeneity can improve coexistence. So the idea is that we're creating different niches on the green roof, so areas of shallow soil and areas of deep soil, and species, say plant species or even invertebrates, will prefer one over the other, allowing them to coexist. Heterogeneity really just means variation, so we use that word just to describe variation on the surface. And so if you come over here, we have a student who graduated several years ago called Emily Walker, who was a master's student in our lab, who added several different types of heterogeneity. She added logs, she added rock piles, and then we also have areas of deep soil and areas of shallow soil that she added to the green roof. And what we did then was to see how this heterogeneity sort of allowed different species to coexist, how it affected germination of seedlings as well. And then we had another student in our lab for his honors, Michael Buckland-Nix, who basically did a GIS survey of this entire green roof. And with the GIS survey, he looked at how heterogeneity varied across the roof itself. And so one of the biggest variations you'll see is if you look over here, there's an area of shade by this atrium triangle. And this area of shade has much taller species, actually has bushes, than this very sunny area, which is much more exposed. And so it was really getting at how shade variation, how deep soil variation allowed different plant species to coexist in these different areas. And so then what we're doing is encouraging sort of the use of heterogeneity as a technique to help build biodiversity in other green roof systems.